I'd like to welcome the first speaker for the proposition, Katie Heggs. Katie is a second-year undergraduate student reading history and politics at Churchill College. She has a huge fan club here tonight, clearly, and she won the right to speak through open audition. Katie, you have the ears of the house.
Thank you. The motion before this House today is, this House believes New Labour save Britain. I'd like to start by defining New Labour here. New Labour was a collaborative project within the Labour Party that pushed for progressive change through Labour values under the leadership of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. There are, of course, many more in this cast of characters, Alistair Campbell and Peter Mandelson as notable examples. What I want to stress before I begin is that this debate is not an assessment of any of those I just mentioned as an individual and their actions as an individual. There is one action in particular that remains a key and valid foothold in the arguments of those who often speak against the successes of New Labour in '97. It is not my intention to belittle the Iraq War by not discussing it, but the debate is on whether New Labour as a political movement and moment, not a particular person, saved Britain and the working people that constitute it. And that is what I intend to discuss. In my speech, I will talk about New Labour and its successes. So I will begin how any good speech defending New Labour should, with a list. 179-seat majority, the longest period of sustained low inflation since the 1960s. The national minimum wage. Funding for every pupil in England doubled. Section 28 scrapped and the introduction of civil partnerships. Free off-peak local bus travels for over 60s. 2,200 Sure Start children's centres. The introduction of NHS Direct for free, convenient patient advice. The introduction of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. 85,000 more nurses, 32,000 more doctors. 1 million pensioners lifted out of poverty. Free entry to national museums and galleries. Thank you, Chris. The cleanest rivers, beaches, drinking water and air since before the Industrial Revolution. Inpatient waiting lists down by over 500,000 since '97. Restored devolved government to Northern Ireland, devolved power to the Scottish Parliament and Welsh Assembly, and employment at its highest ever. I wasn't sure how to prioritise which of the 50 Labour government's achievements I found on the Shrewsbury Labour website, so I just chose at random. Because free nursery places for every 3 and 4-year-old isn't necessarily important to me, but it was a lifeline to someone. Behind each and every one of these policy achievements was a real person. This wasn't Labour as an idea. This was Labour in action. Labour electable, Labour in power with a large, workable and sustained majority. Labour doing what I would hope all those in the Labour movement want, no matter what your factional allegiance, is to change the lives of working people. And that it did. I don't have the experience of '97 that my fellow speakers have to defend or protest New Labour because I have just turned 20. I wasn't alive when 1997 occurred, and if you follow that logic, I should have little to no affection for it. Tony Blair was in office until I was 5, and Gordon Brown until I was 8. I grew up largely under Conservative government, and when I finally became interested in politics, Theresa May was our Prime Minister and Jeremy Corbyn the leader of the Labour Party. So where does New Labour fit into my life, and why do I care so much about it? Because I bought the laptop I wrote this speech on with the child trust fund the Labour government gave me. When I turned 14 and I had to get a part-time job, I was paid a minimum wage as the '97 Labour government ensured. When the Manchester Arena attack occurred, my community in Greater Manchester was rallied together by Andy Burnham, a mayor elected under the 2007 New Labour directly elected mayoral reform. I know that as I grow older, I'll get to attend the beautiful marriages of my queer friends and family because under New Labour, Section 28 was scrapped. And for a while, my mum's job as a Macmillan nurse was just that little bit easier. Growing up, I spent 24 perfect days each year in tents and camper vans because Labour gave all full-time workers a right to 24 paid days holiday. The lives of my family members were saved because free breast cancer screening was offered to all women aged between 50 to 70. My dad got paternity leave. My auntie got, and lost under Conservative government, a job at Sure Start. And I got to the University of Cambridge for some reason. It's personal. I know. But the personal is political, as they say, and being involved in the Labour Party so heavily, I often find myself fielding questions from mainly adults at home who just cannot understand. They think the youth are far too idealistic, and by virtue of being part of Labour, that I fit into that narrative. But what necessitates a Labour government being seen this way? Jeremy Corbyn possibly has something to do with this, and I guess my view is almost entirely skewed by life experience in this argument, but I would say life experience trumps having read Marx once at private school. New Labour saved Britain because it gave the British electorate a new choice, a third way between two distinctly polarising ideologies. And in recent years, these ideologies have just got even more polarised. It was a third way that was Labour, but pardon the pun, new. Fresh, exciting, energetic. And the electorate turned out and voted for this rebrand in hordes. This was no accident. The policy delivered and the difference made to real people's lives was no accident either. When we ask if New Labour saved Britain, it's my belief that it should take on the character of a boots on the ground argument. New Labour saved Britain by giving those who will perhaps now argue fall under the working demand tradition three key things: hope, a reason to vote Labour, and a reason to keep voting Labour. I noticed on the term card, this debate was framed within a statement along the lines of, there are so many parallels between the direction the Labour Party is taking now and that which it took in the 1990s. And I agree, of course I do. I'm not in momentum. I attended conference's speech this year, but watched Keir Starmer's keynote speech from the comfort of my grandparents' living room. And I cannot explain how emotional I felt watching my granddad nod his head, indicating that yes, this man knows what he's talking about. Taken?
What would you say about the criticism level towards maybe Keir Starmer and the fact that the working class now kind of feel disenchanted with the direction that Labour is taking, specifically about trade unions?
I'd argue that's a fair point. Trade unions are an important part of the Labour Party. However, they have dwindled in importance over the past few years. And I think when you're asking that question, you need to take into account what the working class constitutes now. Like, my parents are both in unions, but that's because they do manual jobs, whereas I think most of the people in this room, parents, won't be in a union. The working class is moving in a slightly different direction to what it was like 50 years ago, but I completely take your point. Yes, people are getting excited about Labour again. And I don't mean the people sat in this room, those receiving a first-rate education and watching MPs debate high-strung ideas in their spare time. I mean people who can't afford to not have another Labour government, who are being crippled under the cost of living crisis, who may have made the switch to the Tories, but are just about ready to trust in Labour values again. So, to answer the question, did New Labour save Britain? Yes, I think it did. And if we harness the spirit of '97, I think we can save it again. The state of British politics today, an abject lack of ministerial responsibility, voter disillusionment, corruption and greed, hundreds of thousands of children living on the poverty line while tax breaks are being handed out to the richest of the rich. This necessitates a Labour government that wants to win. This may be in moderation. It may be under Starmer. It may be with a slim majority we have to fight to increase. It requires compromise, cross-factional cooperation, and a bloody hard graft. But it is my belief that things, pardon the cliche, can only get better. Because, to quote Gordon Brown at the final Labour conference before the Conservative Party gained control of Downing Street, we can transform our politics. We can do all these things and more if we think big and then fight hard. Since 1997, Labour has given the country back its future, and we are not done yet. Now is not the time to give in, but to reach inside ourselves for the strength of our conviction. Because we are the Labour Party, and our abiding duty is to stand and fight and win and serve. Thank you.